Welcome to HBCU Play, everyone. I'm Lericia Harris. Alongside me, Sam Crenshaw, and we are, first off, just excited to be back and to bring you guys content yet again about HBCUs, just like we did before. We have a very special guest joining us, and I look forward to our conversation. Mr. Crenshaw, would you like to further introduce who's joining us on the Zoom call?
Yeah, absolutely. Great to be doing HBCU Play once again with you, Lericia. Fantastic. We're going to have a great conversation. I think people are going to enjoy today. Our very, very, very special guest is the Commissioner of the Southwestern Athletic Conference, Dr. Charles McClelland, who joins us from Birmingham. Dr. McClelland, welcome back to HBCU Play.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So
Tell us about how. Yeah, go ahead, Lericia, because you want to ask him the first question.
Yes, I just want to know how you're doing. How are you doing in this time where everyone seems to be, entering or has entered uncharted territory?
We're doing well. From a staff perspective, we allowed everybody to work from home once the virus hit. I was actually in New York with the men's basketball committee when all of this happened. My wife was calling me saying, you need to get home as quickly as possible. We hear New York is a hot spot. So that was somewhere around March 15th, 16th. I got home that Friday. We immediately shut down the office and have been working from home since that point. In between that time and now, we've actually moved into our new building. We're still not working from the building, but we're starting to transition back in and look to have the staff in a modified work capacity sometime in July, heading into August, trying to get ready for the fall season. So everybody's doing well. We've had no one to be affected by COVID-19 within the office standpoint. So we're good, and we're looking forward to trying to get things ramped up, but get it ramped up in a safe manner.
Dr. McClelland, talk about guiding your conference during the time when you lost all of your spring sports, all your spring championships and competition, and just how you were keeping in contact with your member institutions and them keeping their athletic departments online.
Well, as Lericia stated, this is unprecedented, to stop, a hard stop in the middle of your spring sporting calendar was pretty difficult. It was pretty devastating to the student athletes. I think the first phase really was shutting down not only what we do within the conference office, but assisting the membership to shut down, and also have that compassion and be there for the student athletes. You strive your entire athletic career to get to championships and to play in college, and then all of a sudden it was taken away from you. And then especially the seniors, right? They were cut short. When they left, that was it. It was no tomorrow. It was no good opportunity to talk to your teammates or graduate or anything. So, we had to deal with a lot of that transition into what are we going to do for the fall. And right now it's Zoom call after Zoom call. We talk to our ADs and SWAs at least once a week, formally, informally, 2 or 3 times a week. We have a COVID-19 advisory panel that's putting together a extensive document on what will it take to reopen and the do's and don'ts and the things that are going to be required, from social distancing to masks to sanitization stations to how do you handle concession stands, equipment managers, the police, the workers, the officials. I mean, there's a lot to go into it. And we are doing all of that still somewhat unsure about what the fall is going to hold. So it's kind of difficult planning for the unknown. So we have contingency plans for our contingency plans. And I have a feeling that we're probably over planning at this point, not knowing what COVID-19 is going to do or where it's going to lead us. So it's actually been more busy now than it would have been had we been in a regular spring sports cycle, because of all of the planning and all of the unknown and all of the questions that you're trying to seek answers for and also give answers to your membership.
Is it weird just to have Zoom conversations with your staff? I mean, it's different. There's no human interaction. You can't feel a person's vibe. You're talking via technology. So is that weird to you?
It is. And what I have found is we have communicated more, but I have found more lack of communication through these Zoom calls, right? It's different being in the room and being able to show the document or explain the document or give a better feel of how people are receiving or responding to you. So some of our, instructions to each other sometimes have gotten misconstrued because we haven't physically been there. So, we have been extremely efficient through Zoom, but I think the majority of our staff wishes that we were back in the office. As a matter of fact, they were complaining about me not allowing them to come back to the office. They wanted to come on their own. And I said, no, we have to get our sanitization plan together. We have to get all of our things in order for you to come. Because if you come, we want to make sure that the person coming behind you will be safe. So I think we all miss that, interaction. I love my wife and I love my kids. And we've gotten even closer during this time, but there's nothing wrong with a little separation time going to work as well.
I'm sure all the athletic directors and the coaches at your member institutions will probably voice that same sentiment. Student athletes are going to be returning to campus to prepare for the fall, but we've already heard about some key games for football that are not going to be played. The one in Memphis features a team from the SWAC in Jackson State. We're hearing about Southern and Florida A&M. Thoughts about what that does to scheduling, and like you said, we are going into the unknown, but thoughts about that happening and impacting some of your member institutions?
Well, we anticipated that there were going to be scheduling changes, and I think you're going to start to see more. Again, there is no solid plan. COVID-19 is going to make everybody react. Tennessee State and Jackson State, their promoter there, made a call early. I do think that you're going to see other calls. There could be a possibility where the football season is shifted, that we don't get started Labor Day, we get started 2 weeks later. There could be, we could start at Labor Day, we could start in October, we could push it back to the spring. Some of that requires legislation, but I think we have to be prepared and ready. I think you have to be prepared for us to start the season and possibly have to stop the season, maybe restart it, maybe not restart it. So I just think we have to be prepared for everything. I haven't talked to Fred there in Memphis, but from all that I've gathered, the requirements from the city of Memphis as far as social distancing, their ability to have tailgating, what it takes to put that game on, how many fans could come into the stand. I really think that it was more of a financial decision, more so than a COVID-19 decision. Obviously, COVID-19 is driving that process. And again, I haven't talked to Fred. I don't know this for a fact. This is just Charles McClelland's view. But given what it takes and the magnitude of what it takes to put that type of football game on, given what they were going to have to work with as far as numbers were concerned, I think they just said it's probably best to hold this game for this year and look to next year. When you start looking at some of the other games, they haven't been announced, but again, they're all, COVID-19 related. Each school has their ability to be able to make their own calls based upon local guidelines, state guidelines, and the conference isn't going to impose, what you can do or what you cannot do. I wouldn't be surprised if you're going to start to see some institutions say, well, we're just going to forego our entire football season. It's going to be impossible for us to, bear the cost, bear the brunt for us to play football. I think you're going to see schools and games all over the place. Early June, mid-June is kind of early for that to happen, but not necessarily when you're talking about third-party promoted games. That's going to be somewhere around those first, second, third week in September. You're going to start to see other decisions being made, especially in third-party games where there's a lot less control than it would be if it was on a home campus stadium.
We know that the pandemic regarding COVID-19 has been something that has caused quite a bit of a stir in how we would normally go about things. But we've also seen another pandemic, arise yet again. And for some people, they would say this fight has been continuous, that it never ended. And I'm referring to the movement, some of the racial uncomfortable conversations that have risen and have really taken hold and taken the forefront of what we've seen lately in our world. what is your response to some of the things that you've seen from companies acknowledging Juneteenth as a holiday, or companies changing logos or statues coming down? What are your thoughts on this particular aspect of our current stage right now?
Well, I think it's exciting, to be very honest with you, and for me to give that answer, I'll give you a little bit of my history. I grew up in Mississippi. I was born in Gulfport. I spent my first 10 years in a small town called Sardis, Mississippi, 50 miles south of Memphis, and then the rest of my adolescence in Jackson, Mississippi. I grew up in the 70s, so it was 4, 5, 6 years really after, the civil rights movement. And I've seen some things. I've seen some things in my childhood. I remember driving up to a red light with my mom, and the Ku Klux Klan was in full regalia passing out information at the red light, and my mom was just saying, don't look. And I thought that we were, far along than that. I talked to my father just last night. He grew up in Philadelphia, Mississippi. And as you know, Philadelphia is very significant with the civil rights movement. The 3 civil rights workers were kidnapped and killed in Philadelphia. And a lot of those freedom workers that were in Philadelphia stayed at my grandfather's hotel. He was the only one that had a hotel. So they're very well ingrained and entrenched in the civil rights movement. And as I talked to my father yesterday, he said it's worse than the 60s. And I laughed. I was like, Daddy, we've come a long way from the 60s. How can you say 2020 is worse than the 60s? I said, they were killing African Americans in the street. And he quickly reminded me that's what happened with George Floyd. It just was a different version of it. And I started to think about the similarities, the Ku Klux Klan marching in Charlottesville. And, it really hit me with a ton of bricks. He was right. I'm not quite sure how far along we've come since 1964. And that movement allowed us to get a lot of freedoms. We were able to vote without, retribution. And I have a great level of enthusiasm that this movement will have the same effect that movement had back in the 60s that my father was referencing. So, and I will say this, and this is the first time that I've made this public statement, but I had a private conversation with the commissioner of the SEC, Greg Sankey. And he asked me about the movement. And the one thing that I told Greg from my perspective is that it needs to be more than a mission statement. It needs to be a movement. And I don't know if my comment to Greg had anything to do with it, but man, what a statement and what a movement that the SEC said on yesterday, that we're not going to hold championships in Mississippi if you don't change that symbol that represents oppression and racism and death. So I think when you start to have companies and institutions like the SEC say, we have 2 schools in the state of Mississippi and we're not going to acknowledge bringing revenue, bringing notoriety, bringing these events to the state of Mississippi until you remove some of those vestiges of social injustice and discrimination. So again, I'm enthusiastic from what I see, and I hope that we can make as much change today as they did back in the 60s.
That being said, Dr. McClelland, I want to ask you this. I've been wanting to get a chance to ask you this question, and I'm happy that you have your reflections of the movement. I'm 61. I got even more reflections of that time. As a child, I wasn't old enough to get out in the streets, but it was all around me too, growing up in Birmingham. One of the things that happened after that movement, the doors opened at Ole Miss and the predominantly white schools. And it was this exodus of superior talent that went there. Could this movement bring some of that talent back? I think it will, especially hearing some of the missteps by some of the head coaches at some of those schools the last couple of weeks in dealing with this matter with their players.
I think it will, but I think, again, it given that word movement, it's not going to be an overnight process. And again, I've had a lot of time to spend with my wife, and we've had several debates, right? And she asked that same question, and she was like, our talent needs to come back to our schools. And I agree wholeheartedly. But I also relate to her that, that was something that was significant that came out of that movement. My grandfather almost got killed for the right for me and my kids to go to Ole Miss or Mississippi State. So I don't necessarily want to close the door. You have to make the decision that's right for you. But I do think what we have missed in this overall process is that the education at Jackson State is just as good and in some instances superior than the education that you could get at Ole Miss and Mississippi State. Your athletic experience at Jackson State and Alcorn and Mississippi Valley State, Alabama A&M is superior in a lot of instances than what you could get at the University of Alabama and Auburn. You can come here as a 3-star, 4-star, 5-star, start, get the recognition, go to pro. We've proven that time and time again. We have 17 once Winston Hill is inducted into the NFL Hall of Fame this year. 17 from the SWAC that's in the NFL Hall of Fame. We're 6th on that list behind the Autonomy 5. So, and Titus Howard drafted from Alabama State last year. So if you have the talent, you're going to be found. That's one thing about professional sports. They're looking for talent, and they will find that talent. So you can be a 5-star guy and go to Alabama, Auburn, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, sit 2 or 3 years and then get your shot and hope you go to the NFL, or you can come to us. You can make an immediate impact, play for a national championship, get Lericia to interview on the sideline at the Celebration Bowl and get you a ring, right? So we provide those opportunities. There are more stories about our top-notch African-American student athletes going to these Autonomy 5 institutions and not fulfilling their goals as far as playing and or graduate. And you can come to the SWAC. If you go do your homework and your research, you'll see that African-Americans graduate at a much higher rate at our institutions, student athletes, as they do than they do at the PWI. So if you're an African-American student athlete and you're looking at the statistics about graduating, especially in the sport of football and basketball, you need to come to, one of the HBCUs. And we know that the percentages of the student athletes that go pro, let's just think about basketball, right? If you get drafted in the 2nd round in basketball, it's less than a 20% chance that you will even make an active roster. There are only 32 draft picks in the 1st round for NBA. So there are several 100,000 collegiate basketball players out there, and only 32 of them are going to get a shot at the NBA. So to me, it says get your education so you can become a doctor or a lawyer or a pharmacist, and we're the place to be. So I do think they will come. I think we have to deliver our message, and we have to show the benefit of coming to our member institutions. And again, I think this movement will highlight us and what we do at a great rate.
So let's switch it up a little bit here and talk about some of the things that you have been doing. We've all seen the news of the expansion that's happening with the SWAC. FAMU, Florida A&M, is coming to the SWAC in 2021. How did you get that to happen?
Well, we were not in a posture of trying to expand. We knew that we had a lot of boxes to check and the things that we wanted to do. The Southwestern Athletic Conference is 100 years old, and we've had a pretty tight geographical fit, very little movement. Our last movement was Alabama A&M coming in 1999. I think our last exodus was in the 50s or the 40s. I have to go back and get the exact date. So we've been a pretty stable conference. When this movement started to happen, especially within the MEAC, most of the information that I got out was the geographical footprint started to change, given where institutions were financially and some of the issues that they were having. So the initial information that I got from Florida A&M really was a third-party alumni type conversation saying, hey, there are some conversations going on internally. Would the Southwestern Athletic Conference be interested, in Florida A&M? And my initial response was Florida A&M, they're not coming. They've been a part of the MEAC ever since the MEAC started. So it's not that big of a thought process, but sure, who would not take a Florida A&M? And, I have to give all of the credit to AD Courtney Gaucher, President Robinson, the Board of Trustees. They put a plan together. They went to a consulting firm. They got all of their data. They asked us for data. And a lot of people don't believe me when I say this, Lericia, but I didn't think that they were coming all the way up into the vote. I listened like everybody else. And when they voted yes, that's when I started jumping up and down and celebrating, because it is just that big of a move. But I think some of the things that we offer Florida A&M really is that geographical footprint that they were looking for, so they can reduce some of their cost in travel. And then, we lead FCS in attendance. We have the last 42 of the last 43 years. So when you start looking at some additional revenue opportunities, they have Southern, they have Grambling, they have Alcorn, they have the 2 Alabama schools within their footprint. They are already looking at relationships with Arkansas Pine Bluff, and they have large alumni base in Texas. So Prairie View and Texas Southern, their far west teams would have an opportunity to be able to see Florida A&M in a new branding light. So I think it was really the right place at the right time. And again, I'm very religious, and I try not to expel my religious beliefs on, people, but I do think that there was some divine intervention. Everything just kind of lined up at the right time, and we were, as a conference, at the right place at the right time in history, and it just worked out.
That's exciting news. The matchups are going to be thrilling. I mean, it's going to be a classic game practically each and every week.
Every week. That's right.
But here in Atlanta, our concern is for our championship game. It's the Celebration Bowl. As the MEAC loses another football playing member. And I'm not asking you to speak for Dr. Dennis Thomas at all, but your thoughts about this game, because to me, this game means so much. It profiles the very best in HBCU athletics on a very high profile and high stage. And oh, by the way, there's a nice check that goes along with it. But thoughts about what the future holds for this particular game.
Yeah, I don't think the game is going anywhere. And you're right, I cannot speak for the MEAC, but I can tell you about the commissioner that I know, and Dr. Dennis Thomas. He is one of the best administrators in the nation. He knows what he's doing. He has a very firm grip on the MEAC. He has mentored me as a commissioner, and I've said this in many interviews, as excited and exhilarated as I was to get FAMU, I had an equal sense of disappointment and sadness knowing that they were coming from the MEAC. The level of respect that I have for Dr. Dennis Thomas is enormous. And I say that in all humbleness, in knowing that although he lost FAMU, he lost North Carolina A&T, and he lost Hampton, he has a plan. The MEAC isn't going anywhere. The MEAC will continue to be strong, and the Celebration Bowl isn't going anywhere. It will continue to be strong. And if we didn't do anything else, we just enhanced the rivalry.
Before we let you go, just want to talk about something that's happening for the first time in history for the SWAC. You're having a virtual football media day starting July 22nd. What can people expect with you going about football media day this way?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know what to expect. We're going to see this Zoom and this technology. And, one of my favorite commercials, I won't plug anybody, but it was one of those insurance commercials where they have them all on the left-hand side. And one person is, the deal is swirling because their internet is not good, and the other is beating on a pan. I just hope it doesn't turn out that way. We just don't know. But I will tell you, we've expanded it to 3 days, so it really gives us an opportunity to highlight all 10 member institutions and give them the time that they rightfully deserve. We're going to continue our same format and bringing in some celebrity hosts and making sure that we do things in a first-class manner. But it's going to be a 3-day event. We hope it goes off well. There's a lot of planning that's going into it. I just hope our internet holds up and the people are very forgiving in case we don't do it the way that it's supposed to be done.
With Dr. McClelland, we're looking forward to that. And thanks so much for spending some time with us, Lericia. It's been a great time spending with Dr. McClelland today.
It has. I was just going to echo your same sentiments, Mr. Crenshaw. It's been a pleasure having you join us for this conversation, and we look forward to hearing from you yet again very soon.
No problem. Anytime you want me, I'll be here.